I stood near gate 14, my coat draped over one arm, the heirloom veil clutched tightly in the other, when the message arrived. 5 short words. Cold. Final. Actually, it's just her family. No greeting, no apology, not even mom. Just that. Like I was a forgotten errand, quietly crossed off a list. The noise of the terminal faded around me. A woman nearby laughed into her phone, her suitcase bumping against her leg. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, begging for Tandy. Life moved forward without hesitation. But I didn't. I stared at the screen, willing it to change, willing it to correct itself. But the small typing bubble never came back, and something inside me went very still. I didn't cry. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. My chest felt like it was filled with water and glass, something heavy that sloshed and shattered with every breath. But I didn't cry. Instead, I sat down slowly on the cold metal bench, smoothing my skirt like I still had somewhere to be, like dignity hadn't just boarded a plane without me. I had paid for my own ticket. No one asked me to. I volunteered, happy to be included, happy to come. I bought a new dress, not expensive but proper, midnight blue with pearl buttons. I packed the veil my mother wore in 1947, and I wore in 1972. I had it cleaned, pressed, wrapped in tissue, tied carefully with ribbon. I imagined handing it to his bride. I imagined her smiling. I imagined being part of something. There were gifts, too, a check, a locket engraved with their initials. Now, everything sat beside me in a worn floral suitcase, like a museum exhibit of misplaced love. He knew I was coming. He knew I had booked the flight, the hotel. He knew about the veil. And still, he waited until I landed, until I stood exactly where I came for him. And then he erased me with a text. I opened the message again, read it slowly, searching for softness hidden between the letters. There was none. It was exactly what it looked like. Nothing more, nothing less. I zipped up my coat and stood, straightened my back. Maybe someone was watching. Maybe the universe was. And I refused to let it see me fall apart. The taxi line was short. The driver didn't say much, just asked where I was headed. I gave him the name of a quiet hotel I had chosen days ago, back when this trip still had meaning. He asked if I was in town for a wedding. I smiled faintly. "Not anymore," I said. The rest of the ride was silent. Outside, the city passed by in bright colors. Palm trees, wide skies, sunlight that felt almost offensive in its perfection. Too beautiful for a day like this. Too alive for something that had just died inside me. At the hotel, I checked in, tipped more than I normally would, and stepped into a room that felt both unfamiliar and too quiet. The window overlooked a parking lot and a strip mall with a pharmacy and frozen yogurt. Not the view I imagined. Not the life I imagined. I unpacked the veil first, carefully, gently, like it was something alive. Then the locket. Then the card. I placed them side by side on the bed, like evidence in a case no one would ever try. And then I sat in the chair by the window and stared. He wasn't always like this. That's the part that stays with you. He used to cry when I left him at kindergarten. He used to draw pictures of houses with me inside and hearts floating above the roof. He used to sit beside me while I peeled apples, asking questions about the sun, about the world, about everything. And I answered all of them. I don't know what I thought, that weddings were for family, that mothers mattered, that love, real love, left a mark that didn't fade so easily. I thought maybe he'd want me there, not in the spotlight, just behind him, quietly, proudly, present. Instead, he erased me. And still, I didn't cry. I sat there until the light outside faded, until the neon signs flickered on across the street. Then, slowly, I stood, walked to the desk, picked up the notepad, and wrote a list. 2 items. Cancel the transfer to James. Call Margaret. Margaret is my lawyer. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to say. Because if I no longer had a place at his table, I would no longer fund the feast. I folded the veil carefully one last time, placed the locket inside, sealed the envelope, not with tears, but with resolve. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something older, something tired. I stood by the window watching the sky turn from gold to gray. My suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed, not because I forgot, but because opening it meant admitting something I wasn't ready to say out loud. I was here alone, and I had no reason to be. But habits don't disappear overnight. I unpacked anyway. Shoes neatly placed, dress hung carefully, toiletries arranged, like I still had somewhere to go. Then I reached for the wooden box. The veil, my mother's veil, handmade lace, delicate as breath. She wore it, I wore it, and I imagined passing it on, a tradition, a story, a thread connecting generations of women who stayed, who endured, who loved without condition. Now it felt too fragile for this world, too soft for people who send 5-word messages that erase a lifetime. I didn't sleep much that night. The bed was stiff, the silence heavier. I kept waiting for another message, an explanation, an apology, something. But nothing came. By morning, I was done waiting. I called a law office, booked an appointment, dressed with care, and left the veil behind on the desk. I need to update my will, I said. And just like that, something shifted. I removed my son, completely, and gave everything to my granddaughter, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because love is not obligation, and respect is not optional. You're not ruining anyone, the lawyer told me. You're restoring balance, and for the first time since that message, I felt calm. That evening I texted Clara, "Sweetheart, are you free for lunch tomorrow?" Her reply came within minutes. "Of course I am, Grandma." And just like that, I realized something important. I wasn't uninvited from life, just from one moment that no longer deserved me. Clara hugged me when she saw me, told me I looked beautiful, and this time I let myself believe it. "What happened?" she asked gently. I took a sip of tea. "Your father decided I wasn't invited. He had told her I was sick, that I couldn't travel, a kinder lie than the truth. He shouldn't have done that," she said. "No," I replied softly. "He shouldn't have." "What happened between you two?" She asked it like there was one answer, one moment, one break. But it wasn't that simple. It never is. "He changed," I said. "Or maybe he just stopped choosing me." She didn't interrupt, didn't defend him. She just listened, and somehow that mattered more than anything. "When your grandfather died," I continued, "your father came home. He held my hand, he cried, he stayed. For 3 days we cooked, we laughed, we remembered, and somewhere along the way that version of him disappeared. But sitting across from Clara, I realized something else. Love hadn't disappeared. It had just found a new place to live." And then he left. And with each visit after that, something in him closed, quietly, without announcement, like a door that no longer needed to open. I picked up my sandwich, but didn't bite. He married quickly, moved west, built a life that had no empty spaces in it, a job, a house, a new circle that didn't include me unless it was convenient. The calls stopped first. then the visits. Then even the pretense of closeness faded into something polite and distant. Gift cards replaced holidays. Silence replaced conversation. And when I offered help, he took it, but never fully, always with a kind of restraint, as if accepting from me required something he didn't want to give back. Gratitude, maybe, or acknowledgement. Clara was quiet across from me. "Did he ever say why?" she asked softly. "No," I said. Then, after a pause, "But I knew." Her eyes searched mine. "Knew what?" I hesitated, not because I didn't have the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real in a way I could never take back. That I embarrassed him. Her hand froze around her glass. "I was a public school teacher," I said with a small shrug. "Not glamorous, not polished. I wore cardigans with loose buttons and brought Jell-O salads to potlucks." I let out a quiet breath. "His wife's family, they come from money. They speak a certain way, dress a certain way. Everything about them fits together." I looked down at my hands. I never did. Clara's voice was firm, almost immediate. "That's not a reason." "No," I said gently. "It's not." I met her eyes again. "But people don't always need good reasons to leave. Sometimes convenience is enough." She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She had my bones. I could see it in her chin, the way she held herself steady even when something inside her trembled. "I want you to understand something," I said. I leaned forward slightly, careful with every word. "I'm telling you this not to make you choose sides. I'm telling you because no one else will, because it's the truth." My voice softened. "And because what your father did to me has nothing to do with who you are or who you'll become." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope I had brought for the wedding, the one that was never going to happen for me now. "This was meant for them," I said, "but I think I brought it for you." She opened it carefully. Inside was the locket, small, gold, worn just enough to prove it had been loved, engraved with initials, C.W. and L.W., Clara Whitney and Louise Whitney, my mother-in-law. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of Clara at 5 years old, the other of me at the same age. She blinked quickly, her fingers trembling just slightly as she held it. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say you'll keep it." She nodded. "I'll keep it." And somehow that was enough. The check would be rerouted. The veil would go back into the closet. But this quiet moment, this small bridge between generations, this mattered. I had thought I had lost a son, but maybe I hadn't lost everything. Maybe I had found something truer, a granddaughter who saw me, and that was something you could build a future on. My husband died on a Wednesday. It was early spring, the kind of morning that feels too alive to hold grief. Daffodils had just begun pushing through the soil near the porch. I remember bending down to touch one, thinking how stubborn they were, how they came back no matter how harsh the frost had been. He died quietly, no warning, no long illness, just a breath that didn't return. George Whitney was not a remarkable man by the world's standards. He sold insurance, drove a Dodge, made his coffee too weak, but he loved me with a steadiness that outlasted every disappointment life ever handed us. When my mother died, he held my hand for 6 straight hours. When I lost the baby before James, he didn't try to fix anything. He just came home, lay beside me, and stayed until I could sleep again. We were married for 34 years, not all of them easy, not all of them kind, but we chose each other again and again, even in the quiet. After the funeral, James stayed 3 days. He cleaned the garage, sorted old papers, and took 2 boxes of his father's things with him when he left. On the last morning, he hugged me tightly. "You'll be okay, right?" he asked. I said yes, and he believed me. He left me with the house, the Buick, and just enough money to manage if I was careful. He also left me with something else: silence. At first, I didn't notice it. I filled my days with teaching, 3rd grade. Sticky hands, untied shoelaces, juice boxes, noise that filled every corner of the day. Children don't leave much room for loneliness. But evenings always came, and evenings were different. No voice from the other room asking about batteries, no footsteps in the kitchen, just the creak of the house and my own breathing. The first year, James called every Sunday at 5, then every other Sunday, then once a month, then only when he needed something. There were always reasons: work, travel, the baby. His wife preferred structure, preferred space, so I gave him space, enough to lose an entire continent between us. He never said it outright, but I could feel it in the hesitation before introductions. "This is my mom," followed by a pause, a shift, something unsaid hanging in the air. I wasn't polished enough. My hands were worn, my laugh too loud. So I adapted. I sent gift cards for Christmas, kept things simple, easy, appropriate. He never complained, but he never called either. People say loneliness comes all at once, like a blow, but for me it settled slowly, after the casseroles stopped, after the neighbors stopped visiting, after "love you" disappeared from the ends of conversations. It settled like dust. Quiet, persistent, unavoidable. I never remarried. I didn't want to. George was the kind of man you only get once. Not extraordinary, just present. He used to say, "Some men try to be heroes. I'll settle for coming home." And he always did, until he didn't. There were nights, especially in the 2nd year, when I would wake up and talk to him anyway. Soft words into the dark, telling him about James, about Clara, about the strange new noise the furnace had started making. I knew it was foolish, but it helped. I think he would have been angry, not exactly at James, but at the ease of it, the way a son can forget the hands that raised him, the voice that cheered him on, the person who stayed. George would have said, "Mary, don't let him treat you like this." And I would have answered, out loud in the dark, "It's just how he is now." But sitting here now, in this hotel room, with the veil boxed, the will rewritten, and the truth no longer something I can pretend not to see, I think maybe George was right. Maybe I let it go on too long. Maybe I excused too much. But not anymore. Back home, there's a drawer in my kitchen that sticks on the left side. You have to tug it once, hard, and then it slides open all at once with a clatter. Inside are everything I once thought I'd never need again. Receipts, bank letters, photocopies, old warranties, and a folder labeled James. I started it when he got married. At first, it was just for organization. But over time, it became something else. A record. A quiet ledger of what it costs to stay in someone's life when love alone isn't enough. The first paper is from 2003, a $12,000 check, down payment for their first apartment. He said it was temporary. They moved out a year later, with help from their family. No one mentioned my part. Then a credit card payoff, $6,800. He'd lost his job. I didn't hesitate. Mothers don't let their children sink, not if they can help. Then Clara was born, my bright, beautiful girl. I offered to start a college fund. He said it was too early. They never did it themselves. Instead, the folder holds receipts, diapers, a stroller, a hospital bill that somehow wasn't covered. I paid all of it, without questions. A ligament tear, $2,300, wired the same day. Car repairs, $1,120, done. I opened a blank note on the screen and started to type. Dear James. Then I stopped. What could I possibly say that I hadn't already tried to show? I loved him. I raised him. I never asked for much. And still, he pulled away. Instead, I opened my photo gallery and began to scroll. There he was in kindergarten, gap-toothed, grinning, mischief lighting up his whole face. At 12, standing in a scout uniform, saluting crookedly, trying so hard to be serious. Then later, holding Clara in the hospital, pride and fear written all over his young face. And then, fewer photos, longer gaps, fewer smiles meant for me. I thought I would cry, but the tears didn't come. It wasn't sorrow I felt. It was something deeper, heavier, a quiet realization. Maybe this wasn't a sudden cruelty, but the final confirmation of a slow departure that had been happening for years. And then something shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't brave, just a small, steady thought rising somewhere around midnight as I sat in that stiff chair in a strange room. Maybe this is a blessing. If I hadn't come, I might have gone another year pretending everything was fine, sending money, waiting for calls that never came. Maybe this moment, sharp and cruel as it was clarity, because something inside me had begun to whisper, in a voice so calm it startled me. Mary, you have a life too. I stood up, poured the cold tea down the sink, washed the mug. I took an extra blanket from the closet and folded it neatly at the foot of the bed, brushed my teeth, changed into my nightgown, smoothed the comforter with both hands the way I used to at home. Then I got into bed, alone, not because I had been forgotten, but because I had finally remembered something. I belonged to myself. I always had, and if no one else would honor that, then I would. Clara called the next morning. I was sitting by the window again, this time with coffee in hand, trying to convince myself to eat the complimentary breakfast I already knew I wouldn't touch. My phone buzzed softly against the table. When I saw her name, something inside me softened. At least someone thought of me first thing in the morning. "Grandma," she said, her voice tight, "I just heard. Dad didn't invite you?" I closed my eyes. "No, sweetheart, he didn't." Silence. But not the empty kind. This silence carried disbelief, anger. I knew that silence. I had lived inside it for years. "I don't understand," she said finally. "He told me it was just a small ceremony, family only. I assumed you were flying in early. I thought you were part of that." "I was," I said gently. "In my mind, I was." "Why didn't you say anything yesterday? Why didn't you tell me?" I took a slow breath. "Because I didn't want our time together to become about him. I wanted to see you, just you." I could hear her pacing now. He never even mentioned it, not once. How could he? Because it was easier for him to lie than to look me in the eye, and because he didn't think anyone would ask questions. "Well, he was wrong," she snapped. "I'm asking. I'm going to ask him right now." "No, Clara." She stopped. I could feel it through the phone. "No?" she repeated. "This isn't yours to fix. It's not your battle. It's mine, and I've already decided how to handle it." A pause. This time, she was listening. "What are you going to do?" "I already did," I said. "The veil stays with me, the gift goes to someone who deserves it, and my money, my name, my legacy, it won't go where I'm not welcome." "You rewrote your will?" "Yes." "And the trust?" she asked carefully. "It's yours," I said. Silence again, but softer this time. "Grandma, that's too much. I don't need—" "I know you don't. It's the point. You've never once made me feel like I owed you anything. That's why I trust you with it." She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was steady but thick. "I'll make you proud. You already do." A knock sounded faintly on her end. "I have to go, but can I see you again after the wedding?" "I'd like that." "No," she said firmly. "I mean it. I want to stay close. I want to know you, really know you." And somehow, after everything, that was the gift I hadn't dared to hope for. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. The coffee had gone cold again. Outside, the world was waking up. Somewhere, James was tying his tie, checking his reflection, making jokes about florists running late. And he had no idea that his daughter had just stepped quietly away from the story he'd written. No argument, no scene, just a quiet, deliberate step, and maybe that was enough. The call to the bank wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate, measured, like setting down a heavy box you've carried for too long. I waited until mid-afternoon when the lines would be quieter, checked the time difference, dialed the number on the back of my debit card. I wanted a person. I wanted to hear it said out loud. "Hello, this is Rachel. How can I assist you today?" "My name is Mary Whitney. I need to review and cancel all scheduled external transfers and revoke a linked authorization." I answered every verification question without hesitation. Birth date, last 4 digits, my childhood dog, Samson, a Labrador, loyal to the end. Unlike some. Her tone shifted once I was verified. "There are currently 3 recurring transfers, one monthly for $850, one quarterly for $2,000, and one annual disbursement of $5,000 next month. I want them all canceled." "Permanently?" "Yes, and revoke his access." A pause. "He's listed as a secondary contact." "Remove it." Typing. "It's done," she said. Then gently, "For our records, should we mark this as fraud, family reassignment, or personal change?" "Call it clarity," I said. A quiet pause. Then, "Understood." Minutes later, the confirmation email arrived. I read every line, every dollar, every severed link. For 20 years, I had funded his life like a silent investor in a company that never once acknowledged me. Rent, bills, emergencies that became expectations. I called it love, but love doesn't look like one person carrying everything. Love doesn't arrive only when something is needed, and I am not an ATM. That night, I opened the folder labeled James. Every receipt felt heavier now, not because of the money, but because of the silence that followed each one. No thank you, no call, just quiet withdrawals. I stacked them neatly, placed the folder back in my suitcase. I would shred it when I got home. Not to erase, but to release. The next morning I walked, not because I had somewhere to go, but because the air felt good on my skin. Because I needed to remember what it meant to move, just to feel alive. A bookstore, a woman arranging paperbacks, humming. Across the street, a boy tugging at his father's hand outside a bakery. The father laughed, bent down, walked in with him. I stood there longer than I meant to. That used to be us. A cold day in Minneapolis. James was 4, wanted a cinnamon roll bigger than his face. I said no, he pouted. I caved. He licked the frosting first, and we laughed when it stuck to his nose. The memory surprised me, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was warm, untouched. There had been good years. Before distance, before pride, before life started measuring people in money and appearances. Maybe that was the hardest part, knowing the love had once been real, that it didn't break from hate, but from neglect. Like a house left too long without care. Jacaranda petals fell around me like violet confetti. I picked one up, fragile, persistent. I passed a bookstore, a woman arranging paperbacks, humming. Across the street, a boy tugging at his father's hand outside a bakery. The father laughed, bent down, walked in with him. I stood there longer than I meant to. That used to be us. A cold day in Minneapolis. James was 4, wanted a cinnamon roll bigger than his face. I said no, he pouted. I caved. He licked the frosting first, and we laughed when it stuck to his nose.
The memory surprised me, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was warm, untouched. There had been good years. Before distance, before pride, before life started measuring people in money and appearances. Maybe that was the hardest part, knowing the love had once been real, that it didn't break from hate, but from neglect, like a house left too long without care. Jacaranda petals fell around me like violet confetti. I picked one up, fragile, persistent. I passed a bookstore, a woman arranging paperbacks, humming. Across the street, a boy tugging at his father's hand outside a bakery. The father laughed, bent down, walked in with him. I stood there longer than I meant to. That used to be us. A cold day in Minneapolis. James was 4, wanted a cinnamon roll bigger than his face. I said no. He pouted. I caved. He licked the frosting first, and we laughed when it stuck to his nose. The memory surprised me, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was warm, untouched. There had been good years. Before distance, before pride, before life started measuring people in money and appearances. Maybe that was the hardest part, knowing the love had once been real, that it.
And yet, for the first time in days, maybe years, I felt more seen than I ever had at any family gathering. Sometimes dignity doesn't arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. It doesn't need ultimatums or grand declarations. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's a woman sitting alone on a bench, eating a cinnamon roll, savoring her own company, while her bank account breathes freely and her heart finally beats without apology. The law office was quiet, tucked above a real estate agency in a narrow 2-story building with green trim and peeling paint. There was no reception desk, just a brass plaque on the door. Chambers and Reed, attorneys at law. The kind of place that didn't waste money on appearances. I liked that. Anne opened the door herself. Same navy blazer, same composed expression. She gestured for me to sit and poured water into a thick glass. I didn't touch it. I wasn't here to soften anything. "I've reviewed the documents you signed last time," she said, placing a neat stack of papers in front of me. "We've removed your son as a beneficiary and added your granddaughter as the sole recipient of the living trust and estate." I nodded. "Good. Would you like to include a letter of intent?" she asked. "It can help clarify your choices if anyone contests." "No one will," I said. "He won't fight for something he didn't know I still had." She raised an eyebrow, just slightly, but didn't push. "All right, we've also drafted the irrevocable trust as you requested. The terms specify access for education, housing, or medical expenses until age 25. After that, Clara has full control." "Perfect," I said. "She's responsible, but I want her to earn the rest, not expect it." Anne tapped the folder lightly, then folded her hands. "Would you like to include a clause preventing your son from contesting or attempting to access the trust?" "Yes," I said. "Done." The pen felt heavier than I remembered, but signing wasn't hard. It wasn't even sad. It felt like finishing a chapter that had been waiting, half-written, for years. I signed each line, steady and sure. M. Whitney. Again. Again. When it was over, Anne gathered the papers and sealed them into a blue envelope. "Would you like me to notify your son?" she asked. I paused. "No," I said. "Let the silence speak." She slid the envelope into a drawer. "Then we're finished." As I stood to leave, she placed a hand gently on my arm. "You know," she said, "most people come in here clinging to their decisions, hoping someone will talk them out of it. You didn't flinch." I've already flinched for 20 years. Downstairs, the afternoon light had shifted, long and golden across the sidewalk. I stood there for a moment, holding my bag, feeling light. I hadn't just changed memes on a document. I had rewritten the legacy of my own story. James would be fine. He always was. His wife had family money. They'd navigate mortgages, expenses, whatever came. Maybe he'd be angry. Maybe not. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I hailed a cab. "Anywhere in particular?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the mirror. "Back to the hotel," I said. "I have a cinnamon roll waiting." He laughed. And for once, I did too. I didn't want to write him. That was the truth. There was something satisfying about silence, about letting absence speak, letting unanswered questions hang like smoke that never quite clears. But silence can also be cowardice, and I wasn't afraid of James anymore. So that night, after the sun dipped behind the row of shops across the street, I sat at the small desk in my hotel room. I pulled out the hotel stationery, cream-colored, faint blue border, and uncapped a black pen. Not a text, not an email, ink on paper. I wrote his name, James. Not Jimmy, not sweetheart, not the name I whispered over crib rails when he was teething. Just James, the man, the son who had made a choice, and now would hear mine. I paused. Then I began. James, I arrived Thursday as planned. I brought the veil, the gift, and the dress you'll never see. I sat at gate 14 with a suitcase of history and hope, and just before baggage claim, I received your message. 5 words. Actually, it's just her family. I waited. I thought maybe it was a mistake, that another message would follow. I'm sorry, we'll figure it out. Please still come. But nothing came. So I made my own plan. I stayed in a hotel. I walked the city. I watched strangers be kind to one another. I ate a cinnamon roll alone on a bench and felt more dignity than I have in years. I thought about what it means to be a mother. I thought about what I gave you. My time, my body, my money, my stories. I remembered nights without sleep during your fevers, birthday cakes shaped like dinosaurs, spelling bees, soccer games, piano lessons. You were never unloved. You were never unsupported. And yet, somewhere along the way, you decided I no longer fit the image you wanted, that I was too plain, too small town, too much like where you came from, and not enough like where you were going. I don't begrudge you your success. I wanted you to have everything, but I never expected giving you freedom would cost me my place in your life. I wasn't angry when you sent that message. I was empty. And then, surprisingly, I felt relieved, because finally I had permission to stop waiting, to stop sending checks and quiet love and photos that went unanswered, to stop wondering what I had done wrong. It wasn't what I did, it's what you chose. You chose not to invite your mother to your wedding. Not out of cruelty, perhaps, but out of discomfort. You didn't want to explain me. You didn't want to include me in your curated life. So I will not be folded. Instead, I've opened something new. I've canceled all future transfers and removed your access to my accounts. I've rewritten my will. Clara is now the sole beneficiary of my estate. Not to punish you, but because she has never pretended I don't exist. She met me at a cafe and asked what happened. She listened. She stayed. She cared. You used to be that boy. Maybe one day you'll want to find him again. If you do, I won't slam the door, but I won't stand in it either, holding a tray of forgiveness for someone who hasn't asked. Your wedding may not have had an empty chair, but it had mine. And now that I've filled it, with my own voice, my own self, I'm not giving it back. I wish you peace, and I wish you honesty, the kind that begins when you look in the mirror and ask, what did I choose? Love, because I never stopped. Mom. I read it twice. No rage, no theatrics, just truth, clear and weighty. I folded it, slid it into an envelope, and wrote his name on the front. Not for mailing, not yet, but it existed now, like a stone placed gently on a grave, not to mark a death, but to say, I came, I remembered, and now I can walk on. The morning of the wedding arrived like any other, sunlit, clean, a soft breeze tugging at the palms outside my window. No fanfare, no ache, just morning. I had no invitation, no seat among the rows of white chairs, but I knew the time, I knew the place. Clara had mentioned it once, without realizing what she'd given away. So I dressed, not in the navy dress I had brought for the ceremony, but in a soft gray blouse and plaques. Comfortable, quiet. Enough. I took a cabbie. The venue was a private estate on a hill, one of those places built for photographs. Stone pathways, arched hedges, pale roses blooming too perfectly to feel real. The gates were open. Guests filtered in, pastels, linen, laughter. I didn't go inside. There was a bench across the street shaded by an old jacaranda tree. I sat, veil in my bag, hands folded, not hiding, just witnessing. A man parked a golf cart near the entrance. 2 women adjusted each other's hair. A couple posed for a selfie under an ivy-covered arch. Soft music out, strings warming up. And then I saw him. James stepped out of a black car, tall, polished, laughing at something the best man said. His hair combed the same way I used to when he was 5, parted, smoothed with a little water. He didn't look toward the street, didn't glance back, as if the world behind him had never existed. I thought I might feel anger, but I didn't. Only distance, the kind that no longer hurts. The bride approached, pearl pink gown, radiant smile. She slipped her arm through his, he nodded at something she said, and they walked toward the arch. Guests rose, and I stayed on my bench, invisible, whole. The ceremony lasted 22 minutes. I counted. Birds came and went. A dog barked somewhere off. Someone spilled what looked like white wine. Then applause, loud, cheerful. People drifted back down the path. Music swelled. Cameras clicked. James posed with in-laws, with friends, with the officiant. Not with me. Never again with me. I stood, smoothed my shirt, brushed petals from my lap. No bitterness, only release. There's something powerful about witnessing a moment you were excluded from and realizing you survived. I turned away, walked back toward the city, past shops, past the cafe where Clara and I had met, past strangers who smiled at me like I belonged. And I did, because sometimes family isn't who invites you to a wedding, it's who meets you the next morning just to ask how you slept. Clara met me the next day. No makeup, hair in a loose bun, tired but not from sleep. When she saw me, she smiled, not politely, not out of obligation, but with something softer, relief, recognition. We sat outside a small cafe near the park, the same one as before, though we didn't say it. She ordered tea. I asked for coffee. Strong.
For a while, we just sat. The hum of morning life moved around us. Dishes clinking, bikes rolling past, a dog yipping at pigeons like it had something to prove. "How was it?" I asked gently. She blinked. "Strange." "How so?" "It all looked beautiful, perfect, really, but it felt thin." I nodded, giving her space to find the rest. "No one mentioned you," she said. "Not once. I kept waiting for someone to say, 'Too bad Mary couldn't be here,' or even just ask where you were." She swallowed. "But they didn't." "That doesn't surprise me." She bit her lip. "I wanted to say something. I almost did during the toasts, but I didn't want to make it about me or you." "You did the right thing," I said softly. "No," she shook her head. "I think I did the easy thing." I studied her then, eyes red-rimmed but steady. That quiet steadiness, the kind her father never had, but she carried effortlessly. "You're not responsible for my pain, Clara." "I know, but I still felt it." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded napkin. Carefully, she opened it. Inside, the locket. She placed it between us, not quite pushing it toward me. "I brought it yesterday, kept it in my dress pocket the whole time." I gave a small smile. "That's not a pocket piece." "I know," she said, "but it felt right, like I was carrying you with me." I touched it gently, then slid it back toward her. "It's yours," I said, "not just to keep, to wear, to carry forward." She looked down at her tea. "I think Dad knows I'm upset. He tried joking with me last night, but I barely answered." "You don't have to choose." "But I already have," she said quietly. "Not sides, truth. I know who's honest with me. I know who sees me." Something shifted in me then. Not victory, not triumph. Healing. Like a door that had been swollen shut for years, finally creaking open. I wish I could promise it won't get harder, but it might. The older you get, the more people will ask you to pretend things are fine when they're not. She nodded slowly. You're the only one who's ever said that out loud. I reached across the table and took her hand. You don't owe anyone silence. She squeezed back. Neither do you. We stayed like that until the sun grew too warm on our shoulders, until the tea cooled, until the waitress passed by and smiled. You two look alike, she said. And for the first time in years, I believed it was a compliment. Because I wasn't just someone's forgotten mother. I was Clara's grandmother, and that was more than enough. I flew home on a Tuesday. Same airline, same suitcase, but everything felt different. The air in the terminal didn't press against my chest anymore. My steps were slower but steadier. I wasn't leaving anything behind. Not really. I was taking something with me, something I didn't even know I'd needed. The end of pretending. The flight was quiet. A few businessmen scrolling through slides, a couple with a toddler asleep between them. I read a book I didn't finish, stared out the window, ordered tomato juice just to taste something real. The sky over Minneapolis was soft and low when we landed. Not dramatic, not cold, just honest. The kind of gray that asks nothing from you. A cab took me home. The driver didn't say much, and for once, silence didn't feel heavy. The streets looked exactly the same, and this time that felt like comfort, not disappointment. When I stepped through my door, the familiar creak greeted me like an old friend. The house smelled faintly of dust and lavender cleaner. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I walked through each room slowly, the kitchen with its chipped tile, the living room, George's chair still resting beneath the reading lamp, the bedroom, where the photo of him and James as a toddler sat on the nightstand. I didn't touch it, didn't turn it down. I let it remain what it was, a moment caught in time, not erased by what came after. I made tea, not hotel tea, my tea, chamomile and mint, a spoonful of honey, in the mug that read, World's Okayest Mom, a joke from Clara when she was 12. I sat by the window. The late afternoon light stretched across the porch. The daffodils had fully opened, bright, yellow, defiant. I thought I might cry, that coming home would finally break something open, but instead I felt calm, clean, like pulling up an old rug and finally seeing the floor beneath it. Later, I went to the drawer, the one that sticks on the left. Inside, the folder labeled James. I sat at the table and turned each page one last time. Receipts, transfers, notes. A quiet record of love that expected nothing and received exactly that. I brought out the shredder, fed the pages in slowly, not with anger, with peace. This wasn't punishment, it was pruning. What doesn't grow gets cut back. When I finished, I emptied the bin into a paper bag and set it by the back door. Strange how light it felt, considering how much of my life had just passed through those blades. Then I went to the linen closet, took down the box, the veil. I laid it carefully across the bed, ran my fingers over the lace, and this time I smiled. This veil had already lived a life. Ruth wore it, raising 4 children through war. I wore it, burying a husband and still standing. It didn't need another wedding to matter. It had already done its work. I folded it gently, tied it with the same ribbon, placed it back in the cedar chest. Maybe Clara would want it one day. Maybe not. I wouldn't ask. That choice would be hers, just like this week had finally been mine. Before bed, I checked my phone. One message from James. Hope you're doing okay. Ceremony went well. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it.
Not in anger, not in pain, just because it wasn't needed. I climbed into bed. Same side, same blanket folded at the foot. I turned off the light and let the quiet settle. No one was going to rewrite the past, but I had rewritten my place in the present, and in the morning, the daffodils would still be standing. So would I. It's been 3 months since the wedding. The seasons turned, slowly as they always do. The trees deepened into that fuller green, the kind comes just before summer settles in. My garden is blooming again, lilacs now, and those stubborn tulips I thought would never return. I spend more time outside these days, not to escape, not to stay busy, just because the world feels softer when I'm not trying to prove anything. I water the plants, watch the neighborhood kids race their bikes too fast, bake small things no one asks for, and I rest, truly rest, in a way I didn't realize I had forgotten. Clara calls sometimes. Sometimes she visits. We don't talk about the wedding anymore. We talk about her classes, the book she's reading, a boy she's unsure about. She brings coffee, leaves wearing one of my old cardigans, always says thank you, always hugs me just a little longer than necessary. That's our rhythm now. Not a replacement, a beginning. James hasn't called, not since that message, and I don't expect him to. I don't need closure anymore. That's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes the answer isn't reconciliation, it's release. Letting go without bitterness. Stepping out of someone's shadow and realizing the sun still finds you. I've been clearing out drawers, not because I'm preparing to leave, but because I finally want to live in a home that holds only what serves me. I gave away coats, old vases, boxes of Christmas lights I no longer have the ladder to hang. It feels good to unburden without mourning. Yesterday I found an old photograph, me and James at the lake. He couldn't have been more than 9. I had a bandana in my hair, sunglasses too big for my face. He was holding a fish, grinning wide, his hand in mine. I didn't cry, I just looked. He was a good boy once, and I was a good mother. That truth no wedding can take away. I placed the photo back in the drawer, not to forget, but to stop waiting for it to come back to life. Some memories are like pressed flowers. You don't need to hold them every day. It's enough to know they exist. And if you, wherever you are, have ever felt erased, uninvited, pushed aside by the very people you built your life around,